Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says RBI forecasts end to contraction by Q4. We have the Monetary Policy Committee, which has kept the interest rate unchanged in its latest meeting. Why is it done so? That is to give boost to the economy. We have been seeing a decline in the growth as well, and what we are witnessing is contraction in the economy during this COVID-19 crisis. So to give boost to the economy, what the RBI has decided is to keep the interest rates unchanged. What we also have to look at is two important criteria. One, the RBI has taken the accommodative stance, and in spite of increasing inflation, it has kept the rates unchanged. So in this particular backdrop, first let us try and understand what is this accommodative stance. Basically, this is also called as the loose credit or easy monetary policy. What is this all about? When you have the economy which is not going really good, and you also witness there is slowness in the economy, there is growth which is depreciating, there is decline in the growth factors, people are not spending, and what we have is decrease when it comes to the demand as well. In order to give boost to the economy, what we have is called as the accommodative stance. So during this particular period, most of the central banks will expand the money supply in the market. Why? That is to give boost to the economy. This means we'll cut the interest rate so that they can inject the money into the market, and then this will stimulate the market is what is their expectation. So what will happen here? This will make the cost of borrowing cheaper, so people would be able to draw more money, they would be able to spend more money, and what we will have is revival of the economy. So whenever there is cut in the interest rate, it is expected that banks will give more money to the people. People will start taking money from the banks, they'll start investing in the market, they'll start spending in the market. This will revive the economy, and ultimately what we will have is more demand in the market, and therefore the supply also increases in the market. So this ultimately means the money supply in the economy increases, and this will also lead to increasing spending. So when businesses can easily borrow the money, they have more funds to expand the operations, and they will be able to recruit more number of workers, which means the unemployment rate during this particular period also drops considerably. Is what is this accommodative stance? So why is the RBI gone with accommodative stance? That is because of the COVID-19 crisis. What we are seeing is decreasing when it comes to the demand, and in spite of supply, people are not looking into it. So in order to give boost to the spending and to revive the economy, they have gone back to the accommodative stance. And now when it comes to inflation, we have the inflation target of about 4%. We also have a 2% band as well, so it would be able to go up until 6%, and it can also drop up until 2% as well. So this is the range where the inflation can actually fluctuate. But what do we see right now? What we have is that inflation has actually moved beyond 6% barrier. So in this particular backdrop, when questioned, the RBI currently goes on to say this is not because of the actual inflation, that is because of the supply shock. What exactly happened during the lockdown? What we had was major economic activity was suspended. In fact, people had some demands as well during this lockdown, but this was not met because there was drop when it comes to the supply. Why? Because the industries were not working effectively, people were not being employed, people were not able to go to the industries, and as a result there was choking when it comes to the supply sector. And during this particular period, we did not have considerable supply. That is the primary reason there was inflation, says the RBI. But with the economy unlocked, and with the supply chains now open and restored, and all the activities that are normalized, what we will see in the near future is that this inflation might drop, says the RBI, in the near future. So what we have to understand is that it has kept the policy rates unchanged in this particular meeting. So kindly remember, some of the key announcements made by the RBI in this meeting includes repo rate that will remain unchanged at 4%, accommodative stance towards growth will be extended up until next year. We will also have the risk weightages for the home loans, which have been rationalized to spur job intensive real estate sector. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about World Mental Health Day. This is usually observed on 10th of October every year. What is the objective of this particular day? Basically, there are number of people who are suffering from mental ailments. In order to address their issues, in order to make sure that they are aware of their mental ailments, in order to provide them the support, in order to mobilize the forces towards guiding and giving due feedback to the mental ailments, we will be celebrating the World Mental Health Day every year on 10th of October in every year. So kindly remember, this World Mental Health Day usually gives an awareness about the mental health issues. It also takes into picture the stakeholders as well. Who are the stakeholders? It includes the government, it includes the health authorities and the personnel who are working for the mental ailment. So bringing all these people together so that they would be able to create a pattern for the mental health care, address the deficiencies world over, is what is this World Mental Health Day. We have one of the federations called as the World Federation for Mental Health. It is this federation which had initiated what is called as the World Mental Health Day back in the year 1948. So basically, this will prevent the mental and emotional disorders, make sure that in case people are suffering from some mental ailments, treatment is provided to such people and there is promotion and awareness of the mental health. Now let's look into some of the statistics world over when it comes to the mental health issues. Close to 1 billion people are living with a mental disorder. 3 million people die every year from the harmful use of alcohol and one person dies every 40 seconds by suicide as well. In this particular backdrop of the mental distress, mental health issues, what we have to bring in is the concept of COVID-19. The COVID-19 issues has devastated the entire world. We have been discussing periodically once again as well that it has hurt the economic sector, it has hurt the health sector as well. When it comes to the economic sector, in fact, industries are destroyed, people have lost their jobs, unemployment crisis is increasing, and this has increased manifold, and you can compare this to the 1929 depression as well. Such is the state that all the people are facing because of COVID-19. So the economic crisis has increased manifold during this particular period. We also have the health crisis as well. What is this health crisis? People are suffering because of the health crisis. There are people who would be the only breadwinners for the family. They might have lost their lives and the family is in danger. Then you have number of people who are going through anxiety and stress as well. Why? Because they are not able to go out, they're not able to spend their time, they're not able to have community services, they're not able to interact with their family members as well as their friends as well. Such is the state of stress and distress during the COVID-19 times. Another important factor is with respect to women as well. What is happening of late is that number of people have lost their jobs, which also means number of men have also lost their jobs. They're not able to go out since they are at houses. There is increasing cases of domestic violence as well. So what we have is the economic factor, the health factor and the stress factors. All these together have created a scenario where people are committing suicides as well. Let's take some of the examples of similar magnitude from the past. We have one of the instances in 1918 and 19 which had influenza pandemic. During this particular period, number of people from United States of America entered this particular state of suicidal tendencies. In fact, number of them had also committed suicide as well. Then we have the 2003 severe acute respiratory syndrome. During this particular period, the older generation people, that is the elder ones, also committed suicide as well. So there is the probability that because there is crisis during the COVID-19, there are increasing cases of suicides as well. Also remember, during the COVID-19, India also has an unfortunate incident of reporting the very first suicide during the COVID-19 crisis. And after the lockdown was imposed by the government of India, there was closure of alcohol and liquor outlets as well. This had also resulted in increasing cases of alcohol related suicide. suicides. So now what we have to understand is that because there is raising stress, because of the economic factors, because of the health factors, what we actually see is that people are under a lot of stress. They are stressed because they might get infected. They are stressed because they are not having any knowledge about it. They are stressed because of the economic fallout, and they are completely isolated from the community. In order to overcome all these issues, what we require is certain procedures and protocols we have to follow so that we would be able to prevent all these suicidal tendencies. So what we have to make sure is to prevent all these cases of suicidal tendencies, and we have to identify some of the provocations when it comes to the suicidal tendencies as well. On the individual level, we have to understand that there'll be a sudden change in the behavior. People who might be always smiling, people who are more interactive, people who speak more, or people are in a normal state, they, in case they have a sudden variation and a fluctuation when it comes to their behavior, that will have to be identified. In case they have gone used to the substance abuse, what do we mean by it? Let's say, for example, they might not be using or taking drugs as well, but suddenly what they have is bad company and use of drugs, or there is sudden rise of alcohol usage as well. This is one of the criterias. Then there is increasing cases of anxiety, disturbed sleep, and difficulty when it comes to the communication. If this is witnessed in any of the person during COVID-19 or normally where there is abrupt changes when it comes to the behavior, such persons or such people will have to be identified. They will have to be provided all the required mental health awareness, and this should be done on priority. If they are ignored, there could be a possibility of such individuals losing their lives because of the stress and distress and anxiety through the future of COVID-19. And at the same time, we might also have some of the news channels which only focus on the TRPs and sensationalism as well. We have the primetime news channels which actually come up, throw their voice out more than the required decibels, which is not at all required. So some news channels have the very idea of sensationalizing the news. So such reduction of the distressing news channels has to be taken up by the individual, says the author of this article. Also remember, when it comes to the Government of India, it has also released what is called as the National Suicide Prevention Strategy. Basically, there is a set of guidelines and protocols released under this National Suicide Prevention Strategy. So the government, through this particular prevention strategy, has come up with three guidelines. What are these three guidelines? Including a ban or reduction in access to highly hazardous pesticides, reduction in consumption and availability of alcohol. Why? Because this can be an addiction as well, and this can lead to liver failure as well, and this can become a major danger to all those people who are in stress level. So keeping a close eye on the consumption of alcohol during this distress times is also important. A non-sensationalized and responsible portrayal of suicide by the media is another factor as well. We will be discussing about the same in the next point, and that is the Press Council of India's guidelines. So what are these guidelines given by the Press Council of India? Basically, whenever there is a committal of a suicide, it means it's a sensitive issue. So explicitly describing the method of that person committing the suicide should be avoided. Let's say he's killed himself by injecting a drug, or for example hanging. This should be usually avoided by the media. They should not be providing the details of that particular site or the location. They should not use sensational headlines, which we are off late witnessing when it comes to the Sushant Singh Rajput case as well. Such should ideally be avoided, says the Press Council of India. And at the same time, using the photograph or the video footage or the social media link and putting these videos and photographs on their channels is again barred according to the Press Council of India. So kindly remember, these are some of the measures that one has to take to prevent the suicidal tendency, and all the awareness that is required for the mental health and preventing these issues will have to be taken up responsibly as well. So what we require as a way forward bit is the number of functional and the accessible helplines by the government and by the NGOs and by different stakeholders will have to be taken up, and we may have to take up the compassionate part so that we can also address this particular issue as well. It is not only the responsibility of the government, it is not only the responsibility of the NGOs. In case we actually feel that there are someone who's from our close circles, it can be friends, it can be relatives, or someone whom we can actually be compassionate to, we have to engage in more talks, give them some compassionate words, show them some empathy, speak to them, and ask them to come out of this particular issue. As time passes, everything will settle, and ultimately we will overcome these testing times, is what this article all about. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the recent parliamentary elections that happened in the country of Kyrgyzstan. So kindly remember, when it comes to the Kyrgyzstan, we also have to remember the countries in and around Kyrgyzstan. So what do we have? We have Tajikistan, we also have China, we also have Kazakhstan, and we also have Uzbekistan as well. So kindly remember, this can be very important from your preliminary examination point of view. They can ask you a question, which are the countries in and around Kyrgyzstan? So we have 4 countries, that is Tajikistan, China, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. Now the important factor is about parliamentary elections. What do we have? We have the parliamentary elections that took place in the country of Kyrgyzstan. But most of the parties that won were pro-government in nature, which means the opposition mandate was not taken into picture, or it also means that opposition political parties were not into this particular mandate of winning the elections. So what we have is that the results that showed the pro-government parties having a super majority of seats when it comes to the parliamentary democracy. That is why the opposition party calls all the elections that took place in Kyrgyzstan a ploy by the government to make sure that they win the elections, which means democracy in this particular place is not actually implemented, says the opposition political parties. So what are they looking at? They are plunging the country into chaos. They are saying that this particular elections was rigged, and protesters have even captured some of the government building as well. Now that we have to understand is, it is not the first time that such revolution and capture of government buildings has taken place. There have been instances where such issues have occurred as well. Back in the year 2005, we also have the sitting presidents were forced out of office in what is called as the Tulip Revolution. Then again in the year 2010, they had something called as the Melon Revolution, where again presidents were forced out of this particular democracy. So what is this Tulip Revolution? This happens to be the first Kriegs Revolution, which led to the president fall from power. Then we also have another revolution of 2010, which is called as the second Kriegs Revolution, or also called as the Melon Revolution. So in all these cases, what we actually witness is that the political party which had won were taken off during this particular revolution. So if we have to discuss what is this protest all about, the political parties in Kyrgyzstan should win at least 7% of the popular vote to enter the parliament. The results currently show that there are 4 parties which have managed to cross this particular threshold, and we have 3 political parties which are pro-government in nature, and we have only 1 political party which is from the opposition bastion, which means there are 3 political parties which were supporting the government which has entered the parliament, but we have another political party which belongs to the opposition group. So it means that opposition's mandate was not respected, and it is assumed and alleged that there was rigging that took place during this particular election. So what is that we have to understand is one of the important units called as the Collective Security Treaty Organization. What is this Collective Security Treaty Organization? This is nothing but a Russia-led military alliance of all the former Soviet states. So which are the countries it includes? It includes countries like Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia and Tajikistan. Kindly remember, it can be very important from your preliminary examination. Now the question is, what is this collective security treaty organization? This is similar to NATO. Let's say if there is any other country which is attacking this particular group, all these groups come together. They ensure that there is collective defense of all the members, and if they are facing external aggression, all these countries pitch in. So what it can be described is as the Eurasian counterpart of the NATO. So kindly remember, this can be very important from your preliminary examination. Why is this issue important for us? That is because of the impact it may have on Russia and also on China as well. Why? Whenever there is a political turmoil that a country is going through, what it will create is instability in this particular region. Now, for example, we take three important regions. One is with respect to Belarus. Belarus is also in turmoil as well, and Russia has a very good relationship with Belarus. And because there is turmoil in Belarus, the words or the applications or the commitments and the coordination with respect to Belarus and Russia might not go well. And when it comes to another region that we have recently seen, that is with respect to Armenia as well as Azerbaijan as well, and that is with respect to one of the regions, and that happens to be Nagorno-Karabakh region. So in this particular backdrop, once again, Russia is facing the heat and instability of one of the previous Soviet Union regions. We also have another region, and that happens to be Kyrgyzstan in the present scenario. So whenever there is political instability, there will be chaos in that particular region, and this may create unrest which will have spillover effects on the other countries as well. That is the major issue. And when it comes to China, China was also using its One Belt One Road initiative to expand in the Central Asian region. So how does it pass through? Through this One Belt One Road initiative, it used to enter other countries as well. So now, since this particular country is in turmoil, the One Belt One Road initiative could also face some issues, is what this article all about. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the relationship between Sri Lanka and China. There isn't much from this article for us to extract, but what we have to understand is two important things. One is about the free trade agreement, the other is about the Hambantota port. When it comes to the free trade agreement, this was initiated between China and Sri Lanka back in the year 2013, but this was stalled in the year 2018, and they now are continuing the talks to initiate the free trade agreement. So what will be this free trade agreement? What will be the conditions? How will it support China? How will it support Sri Lanka? And what will be its operations and its features will be discussed once we have a clear-cut negotiations between these two countries. Apart from that, we also have what is called as the Hambantota port. According to the global diplomats, according to the political scientists, this Hambantota port is one of the port which has put China and Sri Lanka close together, and at the same time it has also put Sri Lanka into what is called as debt trap diplomacy. But we have the wordings coming from the president of Sri Lanka, who currently says that this Hambantota port is not that of the debt trap diplomacy. So he goes on to support China indirectly, says this particular article. It is this that we have to understand. But in case there are any important updates with respect to the free trade agreement or with respect to the Hambantota port and the changes, we will discuss this particular analogy once again. But as of now, we have to remember that they are discussing about the free trade agreement, and with respect to Hambantota port, he currently goes on to say that there is no debt trap diplomacy which China has engaged with respect to Sri Lanka. And moreover, President Rajapaksa has also sought China's help to reduce the trade deficit between Sri Lanka as well as China. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Consider the following statements. Zoological Survey of India is India's apex organization on animal taxonomy under the Ministry of Environment. It has its headquarters in Kolkata. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is both. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, this article gives certain species and what they they are and where are they found. This might be very important from your preliminary examination, so kindly remember them. And in case there is any issue in the pronunciation, kindly excuse me. We have something called as the Senacis anandani, which happens to be a rock dwelling gecko, and this happens to be endemic to the Western Ghats. So kindly remember these species name, where are they and what they are. Then we have something called as the Spha erotica magada. This is nothing but a frog which happens to be seen in the farm fields of Jharkhand. Then we have Enoplotropes tawangensis. As the very name denotes, it is in Tawang, so it happens to be a dung beetle from the region of Tawang. Then we have the wild ginger called as Amomum nagamiensis. So as the very name denotes, it is Naga here. So this was discovered in Nagaland in the Kohina Zoo. Then we have a wild fern called as the Pteris subiriana, which is not just found in Kerala, but they are also found in Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra. Kindly remember them. This can be a prospective question when your preliminary examination strikes. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following features of the butterflies are correctly matched? We have the Indian Jezebel, which deters its predators with its flashy wing colors. We have Krishna peacock, found in large numbers in the Himalayas. Then we have orange oak leaf, which has the ability to camouflage as a dry autumn leaf. Which of them are correctly matched? The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So when we have to look at majority of the national animal or the national plant or the national bird, we already have them. That is in the form of Bengal tiger, Indian peacock, Indian lotus, banyan tree, mango, so on and so forth, which happens to be the national symbols. Now what we require is a national butterfly. So what we have is the national poll that was conducted by the National Butterfly Campaign Consortium. According to them, and after all the process initiated, now we have filtered down them to about 3 butterflies. That includes Krishna peacock, Indian Jezebel, and then what we have is the orange oak leaf. So what are the features or the characteristics of these important butterflies? First, what we have to look at is called as the Indian Jezebel, which is also called as the common Jezebel. This is known to deter its predators with its flashy wing colors. So which is the Indian Jezebel? What we have in the first picture is the Indian Jezebel. So kindly remember, this is distributed species which is spotted in the gardens as well as in the woodland areas. Then we have something called as the Krishna peacock. This is present in the second image. This is a flagship species for biodiversity and conservation. And where are they found? They are found in large numbers in Himalayas. And the third important one is what is called as the orange oak leaf. So what is the most important characteristic? It is able to disguise, it is able to camouflage, it is able to change, and it almost looks like a leaf when it is camouflaging itself. And that happens to be one of the important features of this orange oak leaf. So it has what is called as masquerading, enables the species to prevent itself from being devoured by the birds in moist forests of northern Western Ghats, central, northern and northeastern parts of India, where they are generally found. So kindly remember, this can be a very important question from your preliminary examination. Now let's look into the next practice question. Rudram missile, recently seen in news, is it a long range subsonic cruise missile, a surface to surface short range tactical ballistic missile? Is it an indigenous battle tank engine, or is it a new generation anti-radiation missile? The answer to this is Rudram is nothing but a new generation anti-radiation missile. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So what is this Rudram basically? We have the radars. So what are the functions of the radars? In case there is a missile or there is an aircraft that is entering our territory, it is through this particular radar that we would be able to intercept them and our machines would be able to destroy them. Now imagine a situation where this radar is present in an alien or an enemy country. So what will that radar do? It will obviously identify any of the jet aircraft that is passing from India into the enemy territory. So what this particular anti-radiation missile will do is that it will destroy this particular radar or any of the other components, neutralizes it, so that that we would be able to conduct the offensive strategy in the enemy country. Why? Because the radars are no more there. Why? Because this has actually destroyed it. Why? Because this has actually neutralized it. So since there is no radar, it is not able to understand the jets, we would be able to conduct the operations which are offensive in nature. And remember, this missile can be launched from altitudes of 500 meter up until 15 kilometer with a speed of about 0.6 to about 2 Mach as well. This anti-radiation missile was developed by Defense Research and Developmental Organization. In simple, it was developed by DRDO. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to World Food Program, which of the following statements are correct? It is the Food Assistance Branch of the United Nations. It is headquartered in New York. The World Food Program is funded entirely by the governments of respective countries on the basis of GDP. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is one only. Why? Because this is not headquartered in New York, but instead it is in Rome in the country of Italy. And also remember, it is not funded entirely by the governments on the basis of GDP, but it is on the basis of voluntary contributions. So there is no fixed amount, or it is not based on the percentage of the GDP, but instead if the government decides that they have to make some voluntary contributions, it is the voluntary contributions made by the government, and it is not on the basis of percentage of the GDP. Why have we taken this practice question? Because the United Nations World Food Program wins the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize. This was initiated in the year 1961. So kindly remember, this was a program which was actually started off by US President Dwight Eisenhower, who had suggested this very idea of providing food aid through the United Nations system. So it is he who gave this particular idea, and it is after this whole process was implemented. So kindly remember, this United Nations World Food Program delivers food assistance in emergency situation, in warlike condition, civil conflicts, natural disasters and famine as well. It also provides assistance during the rehabilitation and during the developmental aid programs. Also remember, when it comes to this particular organization, it also has a close cooperation with the Food and Agricultural Organization and also with the International Fund for Agricultural Development. Let's take some of the examples as to how it has contributed previously. It delivered about 2 million tons of food during Ethiopia's 1984 famine. It was present in Sudan, Rwanda and in Kosovo, then later in Asia after the 2004 tsunami and Haiti's 2010 earthquake as well. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is suffering the second largest hunger crisis in the world, it has assisted 6.9 million people in 2019, as well as helping fight a deadly Ebola virus outbreak as well. Such has been the instances where it has stood and has contributed to removing hunger from the world. How has this World Food Program contributed to India? Back from the 1963 up until today, it has been contributing on the policy inputs, advocacy and technical assistance for improving the access to the food as well. In fact, this was the very organization which also gives some of the input for reforming the targeted public distribution system as well. So why is this important? Because the 2020 Nobel Prize has been given to the United Nations Agency World Food Program. How does this basically work? There are two types as to how food assistance is given to a particular country and to the people. What are these two types? One, there is direct delivery of the food, or they also provide cash based transfers as well. Those are the two important ways as to how it contributes in reducing the hunger globally. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to cultural history of medieval India, consider the following statements. Siddhas of Tamil region were monotheistic and condemned idolatry. Lingayats of Kannada region questioned the theory of rebirth and rejected the caste system. Which of the statements given above is correct? The answer to this is both 1 and 2. So when it comes to Tamil Nadu, we have Siddhas who are also called as Siddhas Devatas who were monotheistic, and they also condemned idolatry as well. And when it comes to the state of Karnataka, we have Lingayats, which was originally initiated by Basavanna, which was completely against the caste system and did not believe in the concept of rebirth as well. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Today we have the essay that you guys will have to write. There are two essays, so this should be in the 1000 to 1200 words. What are these? Words are sharper than two-edged swords. Then we have health is not valued till sickness comes. So please write both these important essays on the comment section. Peer review, come up with constructive criticism as well. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.